Hello and welcome to News9. I'm Aditya Kaul and this is the Diplomat. India and Lithuania have had diplomatic relations since 1992, but Indian embassy has recently been opened in Lithuania in 2023. How are the relations actually progressing today, and what are the trade ties, the cultural ties and the people-to-people contact? I have with me the ambassador from Lithuania to India, Ambassador Diana Mickeviciene. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us. I want to begin by asking you about your experiences in India. You've been here for some time, but from cultural ties to the overall connect and traveling all across and experiencing the traditions of India, how's been the experience so far?
Thank you, Aditya, for taking a call. I have been here for 2 years now as ambassador, but I've been in India for many times before, and this is my second diplomatic posting. Mm-hmm. But I was a student in India twice.
Oh, wow.
So India is my Karmabhoomi, as I say. It's my second home, and I feel not just totally at home, but I love a place and I enjoy every bit of experiences that I have with traditions, culture, food, and traveling for work and for leisure. I think it's equally interesting and exciting.
Any favorite cuisine or places that you've visited so far outside Delhi?
That's what everybody asks, but India is so huge and so diverse that it's very difficult to single out one cuisine. I love, I'm always telling me, people that Bengan ka bharta has been my favorite dish, but I love South Indian food. I love Himachali, food. When I go to, the Tibetan settlements, I love momos and, and the Himalayan cuisine. So it's very, very difficult to single out one particular place or one particular dish or one particular group or culture.
Sure. We also saw your interview and that entire conversation, if I should say, with the Ukrainian diplomat on the Hindi Divas in September, where it almost went viral, where you were speaking in Hindi and reciting Agnipath, the famous poetry by Harvansh Rai Bachchan. How did you learn Hindi? What's the story behind that? And you speak quite a fluent Hindi now.
Well, I wish I could speak even better, but I can speak Hindi. सब कुछ समझती हूँ, लेकिन serious बात के बारे में तो थोड़ा मुश्किल कर रहा है. लेकिन okay, poetry is it's a vehicle to know the language. I've been interested in Hindi since long ago, and I've learned, I forgot, because as diplomats we go to countries where you don't practice, so you forget and you pick up where you left and you go a little further, then again you go back. So that's how my Hindi has been sort of, it's a puzzle which I'm still, मैं सीखना जारी रह रही हूँ, हर दिन रह रही हूँ, इससे अच्छी तरफ सीखना चाहती हूँ. And Harvansh Rai Bachchan was such a discovery to me. I totally fell in love with his. Agnipath is a short and a simple but extremely powerful poem. But Madhushala is also my favorite, and it's a big one. It's a complicated one. So I think one can spend life, learning and trying to understand Madhushala, and it gives me great pleasure. It gives me opportunity to learn more about India, about the images. Suppose in poetry you use a lot of imagery, symbols, which give you a lot of information about the thinking, the way of life, the way people compare things, imagine things, the way they dream, and then finally you connect to your own culture, because poetry, I think, is also very universal.
Absolutely, it is. It is quite a connect. But Ambassador, you also had an event recently on Sanskrit language and Lithuanian language. So is there a connect? Are there any similarities that you have found for viewers who do not know? Could you fill in?
Of course, this has become a major pillar of our cultural diplomacy.
Right.
And this is a linguistic fact that our language, which is a small, quaint language far away in the north, spoken by roughly 3 million Lithuanians abroad and another 1.5 million in our diasporas around the world, is considered to be one of the closest, if not the closest, living languages similar to Sanskrit. So sister languages of Sanskrit. And the similarities are not just in words, there are many words. We have recently published a small dictionary which gives the sort of the idea of similarities in words. It's a small compilation of 108 words. It's a sacred number specially chosen to give sort of an illustration of that similarity, but it's not an exhaustive list, and we are currently working on a much bigger dictionary where this is my baby of love, so to say. I am I've initiated it because I saw that we can do a much better illustration of that commonality, where we would have hopefully around 1,000 words, and where a Lithuanian scholar will work along with an Indian scholar, so this will be a very joint collaboration. But apart from words, the striking similarities in grammar, and I myself studied Sanskrit at the university, so I know what I speak. I don't sort of repeat someone's word, but I have experienced that in grammar, in conjugation of verbs, and in declination of nouns, there is striking similarities where you can actually relate directly. So ours has been a very ancient language, tucked away in villages and not modernized, and probably for that reason it remained as archaic as Sanskrit, which became a sacred language. Therefore it was preserved, and it was, it received that almost divine status in India. So this is something which we have been exploring a lot. It gives incredible impetus to bilateral relations. It warms the hearts of people. When you introduce those linkages, people really are very surprised in India. But the result is very good. The result is a very warm conversation that you can engage. While in Lithuania, this connection is known much better, and Lithuanians take pride in it and think that this is proof of how valuable linguistic connections can be, how they can connect the countries which are at rather big geographical distances.
Well, absolutely. Since I asked you about the Sanskrit language and the Lithuanian language, let me also ask you about Ayurveda and yoga. Because Ayurveda, of course, India has been focusing on it for years and years together, and there's a Ministry of Ayush that also looks into it. Apart from that, yoga, the International Yoga Day at the behest of the United Nations and India's initiative, has been an annual exercise now. So how much of impetus, how much of support does Lithuania also give to yoga, or some kind of a collaborations on Ayurveda?
Well, I think it's just very popular. I don't even know if it requires an extra support because it is taken up by people directly. So to my knowledge, there are dozens of yoga schools in tiny Lithuania. Every city, every town would probably have a yoga studio by now. It's very popular, and from what we hear, Lithuanian tourists who come to India, a big fraction of them actually come, their trips are related to yoga or Ayurveda, coming to the other topic that you have raised. So I think these are two great gifts India has given to the world, and we would be happy learning and using them for the benefit of our well-being, health, but also probably better understanding, as you are raising it as an issue in bilateral relations. So it does help. It also warms people's hearts. People relate to it. People see the benefit of it.
Now, coming to the bilateral relations overall, how would you describe the bilateral relations as of now between India and Lithuania? Of course, it began in 1992 when immediately after the diplomatic relations, we had the Indian Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao meeting the counterpart on the sidelines of the Rio summit. And thereafter, there's been a steady progress. In 2023, we had the Indian embassy being inaugurated there as well. How would you describe the relations as of now, and what would be your expectations in the coming months and years?
So I would describe this relation as a very good relation. Yet the relation that needs to be filled in with a lot of substance. And it took us years to discover the potential of each other's. We established our embassy in Delhi in 2008. So it took us a good 16 years from the first official contacts, diplomatic relations established, the meetings of our prime ministers at Rio summit, as you mentioned, to to be able to open the embassy in Delhi. And finally another 15 years, and we are happy to have Indian embassy in Vilnius. So I'm very happy to have a counterpart with whom we work together. We consult very often. We are in touch on a weekly basis. And so finally now we've got a very good, tools and vehicles to drive this relationship further. So yes, we have had, of course, trade relations. Over 30 years we have developed, I would say, not a bad, volumes of trade, but seeing what's inside and how this trade and the trends were changing, I could see probably that the direction the trade and generally economic relations have taken is towards high tech and services. It used to be, trade in traditional goods, which would probably no longer be the case. We still trade, and of course we continue to, and we want to expand our own exports in India, and Indian exports in Lithuania are also welcome. But services are becoming important pillar, and having in mind your IT, services at large as a sector, your talents, who increasingly, are in great demand in Europe, but also in Lithuania, and our own services, which is a know-how in extremely important areas like, GovTech, FinTech, Cybersecurity, your digitalization, the pace of India's digitalization. I think we are moving towards, intensive exchange of services, because we have what we need. We can take, what we need from each other. And also another element is high tech. So high tech, from what we have seen, what our companies are increasingly looking for in India is the market, very growing market, very digitalized market for excellent technologies we have developed. So we worked nicely in a beautiful, in a small market, and they seem to be in demand here. Suppose in networks, in IoT spheres, we have companies which have come and which have started working, and we have a Lithuanian company which is active in the hardware of telematics. They have, last year's statistics said that they had 1/3 of India's market for hardware in telematics, while the software that is put into that highway can be, local, can be joined, can be developed specially for the company's needs, for the public sector needs, and it works in across the sector. And then, for example, we have unique technologies in biometrics. So I'm very happy, and I'm always, proud to share the fact that in Aadhaar, the biggest, biometric identification project of the world, the Aadhaar 2 stage will have a little bit of Lithuanian technology in biometrics, because we happen to be one of the best in the world. So the Indian developers who have been upgrading Aadhaar for the further usage have found it very useful.
Ambassador, since you mentioned high tech and you laid emphasis on that, and you mentioned the amazing example of biometrics and the Lithuanian contribution in it, two other areas are also startups and as well as cybersecurity, where Lithuania plays a very leading role globally. How are those sectors faring with collaboration with India? And could you also give some data and statistics when it comes to at least startups, how Lithuania has been doing on that?
We have been doing very well on startups, and I know India has also been pioneering in several areas. So, but startups can come from any areas,
Yes.
So we have our startups which can be from fintech, for example, in lasers, in biotechnologies. So we develop unique technologies, and then of course we want to come and find a partner, because in India you need to have a good partner to be successful. So that's where I think we have an opportunity. You have mentioned cybersecurity. We are number 6 in the world for cybersecurity. And I have to say, we've still been a little shy in India, in the sense that our companies have gone to other countries in the region, like Sri Lanka, like Bhutan or Bangladesh, which are slightly smaller or very small compared to India, which are probably which have an environment easier to access.
Right.
So, but I'm very happy to say that it was Lithuanian companies which set up national cybersecurity response center in Bhutan, for example, and in Bangladesh. So I always encourage them to come and look at India, because, well, India has everything of its own. It's not a problem that India doesn't have something, but the scale of expansion of digital way of life is such that, especially in cyber, the more you expand, every person would need some sort of training in at least the basic cyber hygiene. The demand is such that I think it's enough of work for literally everyone. And in our case, cybersecurity has been and remains a national security issue. We are in a volatile geographic situation. So since a decade and more probably, cybersecurity has been regulated by national security directives. Therefore, we are good. We had no choice. It was not actually even by choice that Lithuania took up cybersecurity. We had to survive, and therefore we took it very seriously. So we are very happy to share our practices. And I know that our experts are in charge, together, and they cooperate. They jointly lead the anti-ransomware initiative, a global anti-ransomware initiative, where India and Lithuania are in the driving seat.
One data that I discovered was that there's highest number of Indian students getting work permits and residency in Lithuania. And that made me happy. I wasn't really aware of that. How does this describe the potential of more Indians interested in getting educated and working in Lithuania? And would you see a steady increase in this as well?
Of course, we are very welcome to receive Indian talents, and in fact we receive them already. And if you ask about students, well, the statistics is probably over 2,000 by now, which has experienced steady growth. And how could it translate? A simple example. Last week we had a laser delegation from Lithuania, which was mounted by the Lithuanian Laser Association, and there were 10 companies who came to take part in the photovoltaic exhibition in Mumbai. So the head of the delegation, Professor Rachukaitis, who is the head of Lithuanian Lasers Association, told me that he has a doctoral student who is an Indian national, the lady who has come to him and is doing her PhD, is about to complete her PhD. So this is the answer to you. She's already joined the lab of the physical and nature science laboratory, and she'll complete her PhD. And of course, the market is such that every talent who has got this unique expertise will be, very welcome to join either companies or research bases. So of course, it's easier for students who have studied in the country, who have, grown accustomed to the country, to stay and continue the research. And I have to say it's just the beginning, because what we see in the potential in several areas, I've mentioned before, IT or ICT by and large, in which we talked about cyber. Now I've mentioned lasers. We have biotech, which is a flourishing sector in Lithuania, but it's also very strong in India. Mm-hmm. So if we continue and we manage to really put our scientists together, this will be to the advantage of both countries. It is still, I think, at the very initial stage where we need to really work a lot more. But for example, on lasers, I also know we are a laser superpower. We are a very small country, so superpower is probably a very ambitious word to use. But for lasers and for specific types of lasers, especially femtosecond, which is short pulse and extremely high intensity lasers, we are a leader in the world. So I've been told that most of Indian scientific institutions which work on lasers have Lithuanian lasers in their laboratories. It's already the fact. But what we want to do right now is to have to work together on industrial lasers, because the new industries, the smart industries, of which India has the ambition, to become a manufacturing powerhouse, and it's already underway, would need lasers like that. So I could, very proudly say that Lithuanian lasers could be in the nearby future, an important component of your success as a smart manufacturing power. And that's what I would like to do also in my stint.
Well, it might be a nascent stage, but we hope that these collaborations and research really benefits people of both India and Lithuania. Coming to tourism, there's a lot of inflow of Indians, going to Europe all across. How is India-Lithuania tourism like? Are there people from India going there and people from Lithuania also coming here? And do you also feel that there are external stakeholders apart from government also playing a role, tour operators, VFS and others playing a significant role in this?
Well, I think there is much we can do on this, but this is happening. The fact is, that tourists are going. So far, in fact, Lithuania has been a bit of that boutique destination where you don't have groups, big groups. You would have families with very individually tailor-made trips, and I think this is also good. And so many people come back and say it's very nice, because it's one doesn't feel that it's in the rush. Even though we are a tourist country, we receive like almost the same number of people that are that live in the country. Right. So it's a tourism is very well developed. Indians still take time to discover it, and our tour operators are also taking time to come in and advertise themselves very actively. On the return, sort of the opposite direction, I think we are experiencing a lot of flows from Lithuania to India. Much of this is either yoga or wellness, or both sort of related. But then you also have tourists which go, just to experience India, just to experience the cultures and so on. So it's growing. It's definitely below potential, but that's why we are for, to. And for external factors, I think it's the companies who need on both sides need to be a little more active in attracting each other's attention. We also invite them to come and present themselves, to present the country more in the travel fairs, and tie up with Indian travel operators. So this is the work in progress.
Ambassador, coming to some very critical global issues now, and the biggest of all, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war and the Russian aggression that's been witnessed. You yourself and your embassy in fact hosted an event on that, a film that was shown, a documentary on the humanitarian crisis and people who are suffering in Ukraine as well. How do you describe the situation at present? It's been much more than 2 years. And do you also feel with the Trump presidency now that there is some kind of a way out of concluding and ending this war in the next few months? Or do you think that the status quo remains?
Well, it's not for me to speculate on the question. I would not really like to do that. What we stress, that this is an illegal invasion. There was no reason to do that. And what we want to tell to our Indian friends, it is very often overlooked as a sort of great power game, but the reality is that it's an imperial Russia which has decided to expand, and we shudder, we fear, we feel, and actually we know that if this is not stopped in a correct way, in a just way, we'll be the next, we might be the next, or someone, because even when this so-called special military operation was announced, Putin himself said that his historical mission is to recreate the greatness of Russia in the territory of USSR. This is the quote you can find in the same statement. So I really wonder why people try to justify it somehow, that someone provoked someone, and so on. To us, it's an outright act of aggression, not the first one. There have been acts of aggression against Moldova, against Georgia, even against Ukraine before. This has not been stopped. So whatever it takes to stop it, it has to be, we argue for a just peace, because Ukraine didn't really deserve or didn't do anything to deserve such a brutal war. And the second thing, there's been guarantees given to Ukraine which have been violated by one of the guarantors. So there is a duty of international community, of other guarantors, including, US and UK and others who have in fact subscribed to that same memorandum guaranteeing sovereignty of Ukraine, which has been now blatantly violated. So what we want to say is that any artificial ceasefire or whatever that is imposed in one way or the other would not solve anything, because the aggressors are emboldened. If they don't get punished, they don't get to assume responsibility, they will wait out, they would lick the wounds, because Russia has been suffering a lot in this war. It's not just Ukraine, and they will do it again, because we have done it already over 30 years that we have seen. So any peace that can or should be achieved has to be a just peace that prevents the further war. That's the bottom line, that what we want to say, and we want to be heard as the people, as countries in the, not far away, but in fact very close by. My country is 500 kilometers from the battlefield right now, and we feel it very closely. We have also hosted a huge number of Ukrainian refugees, so we also know about what is happening, not from radio or TV or media, but in fact from the people. Yes. So we are, of course, we admire the determination of Ukrainians to defend themselves, and without speculating where and what could further evolve in that situation, we could see that Russia has already lost Ukraine, in psychological, in cultural, in civic terms, they've lost Ukraine for good. There is a hatred that will stay for 100 of years now. And well, if you ask me what we are doing, we are, of course, you probably know that we are a loud voice calling for a just peace, not for any peace that would give the opportunity to brief for the aggressor and would attack, would allow him to attack again, but for a peace that will settle the issue, which means that basically they would deny that there was any reason to start this war. We have UN Charter, we have territorial integrity of Ukraine, which everybody recognizes, yet is being blatantly violated.
Ambassador, Prime Minister Modi from the beginning has been saying that this is not an era of war, solutions cannot be found in the battlefield. He also met Putin and Zelensky and reiterated the same. He also said, especially to the Western countries, that you have been telling me that I don't have a stand on the issue, but my stand is very clear. It's the stand for peace. It's the stand for negotiations, diplomacy, for ultimate peace. How do you see India's role as a peacemaker, as someone which has not joined the war or joined one axis against the other, but is friendly with both sides and ultimately wants peace?
Well, of course, we are for peace too, and we greatly value that statement, which 2 years ago the Prime Minister Modi ji said it for the first time, repeated it several times. Latest times were visits in Moscow and visits in Kiev and even recently, definitely. But what is difficult for us is to have the equal distance from aggressor and the victim. See, if the victim stops fighting for its survival, there is no Ukraine. But if the aggressor minds the wise words of the Prime Minister, yes, the war will end the same day, the same hour, in fact, So yes, of course, we support and we agree to it completely. But, 2 years passed since the very first wise statement. Unfortunately, Russia didn't really mind it at all. It continues to wage the war, which is getting more and more brutal with every day, every week. It acquires certain proportions geopolitically, because now we have North Korean troops, and here we come to, you could say that, there is just one aggressor, dictator, basically. It's a leader who's a dictator who's decided to wage a war. But no, there are others in other continents which are waiting and watching it. So any failure to stop the aggression, it embolden the others, and vice versa. Any act of aggression that would be on the similar proportion in Asia embolden someone on another continent. So what we have been seeing and saying, and my government has also, laid it out in their strategy, which we adopted last year as a government decree on, our relations with Indo-Pacific region. What we see is basically that our securities between Europe and Asia are interlinked. And
Right.
what happens, where the breach of UN Charter, breach of security on one side, does have a repercussion on another side, and vice versa.
Ambassador, sorry to cut you, but my next question is related. And since you mentioned Asia, how do you see the regional security situation here, especially when it comes to the Indo-Pacific strategy? And when it comes to India, keeping China under check and the larger democratic nations coming together to support India against China, which is certainly not the best example of a democracy today, and is doing something increasingly against the rules-based order?
Well, I've spoken a lot about that. We have, in fact, spoken about that. And I've just mentioned that security and the insecurities or breaches of, UN Charter, territorial integrity are linked. There are linkages, and it's not Lithuania's view. It's, in fact, I think the Japanese Prime Minister had said it very beautifully in Delhi, that there is a linkage, and we have to look at it as a linkage. These wars are not, without a relation. Our strategy of cooperation or engagement with Indo-Pacific, in fact, talks about what you have just evoked, about strong links to democracies. Because, we positioned ourselves to engage much more with democratic countries which behave in a similar way, which, subscribe to a similar set of rules. And at the same time, I think they do have a common responsibility to defend those rules and the democratic setup. Because in a democratic setup, people can also challenge the government, But in a non-democratic country, in a dictatorship, people won't have a say in what the government is doing. Therefore, government is unaccountable, and that's where you have those breaches of, rule of law, or inside, but international rule. Rule of law outside. So yes, our Indo-Pacific strategy talks about us working much closer with democracies, and India stands out as the largest democracy in the world, in which with which we want to engage on all possible questions of international law, of human rights, of everything that is therefore the benefit of a global community.
My last question to you, Ambassador. What would be your top priorities now, looking ahead, to actually take the India-Lithuania partnership and the bilateral relations to the next level, perhaps in the next few months and years?
Well, I probably should have mentioned it, when you ask how do I describe this question, the status of relationship. But half jokingly, I have said that before, that we could basically describe them as the partnership from Sanskrit to satellites, or Sanskrit to semiconductors.
Very well said. Yeah.
So, and again, I come back to the high-tech partnerships and high-tech cooperation, because I totally believe that this is the future of our relationship. And my priorities would be related to Sanskrit and satellites and semiconductors. My project, which I have started, and my colleagues are helping me in that, is to in fact move our scientific partnership to a situation where scientists work along each other, developing the much needed research. And then I think from there we come to the startups, which are joint startups, and then we have the technologies and the output of research, which is put in business and used, and it connects the countries. I absolutely believe this because I see complementarities. And while it probably is difficult for a huge country like India and a small country like Lithuania to, to find commonalities, but in fact, this is the beauty of the relationship, because we don't compete.
Right.
We don't compete, and on the contrary, you know, the public goods or technologies that India has, you know, found are welcome and easily usable in other countries, including ours, and our technologies, which have been researched and used and applied in very small market, seems to be working wonderfully in a big market like India. And also, you know, the example of lasers that I gave would be like, you know, you have these very unique technologies which can, you know, be of great use to a great manufacturing revolution that India is undergoing, because India needs those things. So complementarities are what mark our partnership, and I think it's up to me now and up to Ambassador of India in Lithuania to work and see where the bottlenecks need to be, you know, opened up, where more information exchange, where more partnerships should be, you know, happening, and that's what we are doing to achieve that high-tech partnership.
Well, it's beautiful, really, how you put it, from traditions to technology, from Sanskrit to satellite. We wish the India-Lithuania partnership the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ambassador, for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure talking to you, Aditya.
Same here.